Let's work on adding and subtracting fractions. So adding and subtracting fractions follow a rule that the numbers on the bottom of the two fractions that you're adding or the two fractions that you're subtracting must be the same number in order for you to add. So for example, if we have 3 over 5 plus 1 over 5, we can add these two fractions once the numbers, which are called the denominators, once the denominators are the same, we can add. And we do that by adding the numbers that are on top. So we have 3 plus 1, which gives us 4. And we keep this number on the bottom, whatever that number is. So our answer for this would be 4 over 5. The rule also applies for subtraction, that in order to subtract two fractions, we need to have the same numbers on the bottom of the two fractions that we're subtracting. So let's say if we have 9 over 10 minus 1 over 10, we subtract 9 minus 1 is 8 over 10. And of course, if your fraction needs to be simplified, you must simplify it always. I talk about how to simplify fractions in another video, but we're going to divide both the top and the bottom by the same number, which is 2. So if we divide by 2 on top and on the bottom, we get, coincidentally, 4 over 5. Okay, so addition and subtraction follow the same rules for fractions. You must have the same number on the bottom of both fractions in order for you to subtract. So what happens when you don't have the same numbers? Well, when you don't have the same numbers on the bottom of the fractions, we have some work to do. So let's do an example. Let's say if we had 3 over 8 plus 1 over 10. These numbers are not the same, so we cannot add the top and keep the bottom. That doesn't apply here. But in order to do this addition, we have to make those numbers at the bottom become the same number. Now, math isn't magic, so we're not going to just erase the numbers and put the number that we feel like. There's a process in order to get the number. So what we need to do is we need to find the least common multiple of 8 and 10. So I'm going to write that down. It's called least common multiple. You may have heard it as least common denominator. It is the same thing. Multiple is a more general term. When we're talking specifically about fractions, you may use denominator. Okay. We're finding the least common multiple or least common denominator. I'm going to write multiple so that you remember what we're talking about. When we talk about multiples, that means we're counting or we're thinking about the multiplication of 8 and 10. We're thinking about the multiples. That means if we count by 8, or if we keep adding 8, and if we keep adding 10, what number do they have in common? So that means if I'm counting by 8s, I'm thinking about the 8 times tables. 8 times 1 is 8 times 2 is 16, times 3 is 24, times 4 is 32, times 5 is 40, and 48. It goes on forever. Multiples don't stop. We do the same thing for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Well, I noticed that I found a number in common. And because we're looking for the smallest number that they have in common, okay, we can stop once you find it. So the smallest number they have in common is a 40. That's what least means here. That means we're looking for the smallest multiple that they have in common. So the smallest multiple 8 and 10 have in common is 40. And what this tells you is that that's the number that we want our denominators to be. So 40, we want to be the denominators. So again, math isn't magic, so we're not going to just erase the 8 and put the 40. What we have to think, what do we do to 8 for it to become 40? What can we multiply it by? Okay, because we want an equivalent fraction that's going to have a denominator of 40. And as I talked about in the earlier video, that equivalent fractions are formed in two ways. Is either you have to multiply by the same number top and bottom, or we divide by the same number top and bottom. Well, in this case, we're multiplying to get to 40. So we're going to multiply by 5, because that's what gives you 40. And what I do on the bottom of the fraction, I must do the same thing on the top, because remember, I want an equivalent fraction. Okay, now I do the same for 10. I have to think, how does 10 become 40? Well, 10 times 4 gives me 40. What I do on the bottom of the fraction, I must do the same thing on the top to get an equivalent fraction. Okay. So once you've done that, now you have an equivalent fraction to 3 over 8 is going to be 5 times 3 is 15 over 40. And 1 times 4 is 4. 4 times 10 is 40. Now we are in a situation where we can add because we have the same denominators. And we do 15 plus 4, which is 19. And we keep the denominator the same, 40. And that's our final answer. Cannot be simplified, so that's where we stop. Okay. Let's do another example. Okay, the same rules apply for subtraction. So let's say if we have 5 over 9. Use a different marker. Let's say we have 5 over 9 minus 1 over 3. Okay, so we see here that we do not have the same denominators, so we can't subtract these fractions as they are. We have to make the denominators become the same number. And we do that by looking for the least common multiple of 9 and 3. Well, if you count by 3s, remember we're looking for multiples, so we're counting by these numbers. If you count by 3s, we get 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, going forever, 21, 24, 27, so on and so forth. If you count by 9s, 9, 18, 27, there are quite a few common ones, but we want the smallest one that they have in common. Okay, the smallest that 3 and 9 have in common is a 9. Remember, the least common multiple tells you what you want your denominators to be. That means you want both denominators to be 9. Well, if we look at our fractions, this one is already a 9, so we don't have any work to do on this side. We have what we want. But this 3 is not a 9, so we ask ourselves, what do I do to this 3 for it to become a 9? Well, if I multiply it by 3, it will be a 9. And what I do on the bottom of the fraction, I must do the same thing on the top so that I get an equivalent fraction. So now we have 5 over 9 minus 3 over 9. Now our denominators are the same, so we can subtract. 5 minus 3 is 2, and we keep the 9. And that is our answer. I hope that helped. Thank you.